Hi, my name is Heidi Roop, and I'm co-presenting today with Rob Montgomery, and we're going to talk to you about some climate change initiatives underway in Wisconsin and Minnesota. I'm going to kick off by talking about Minnesota, and then Rob will pick up and show you some of the amazing work that's happening in Wisconsin. But first, I'm going to frame the conversation sort of around what is the role of the water sector broadly in climate resilience. The Minnesota Climate Adaptation Partnership, which I'm representing today, is working to sort of address this question and provide tools and resources that help you all do your work in light of a changing climate. Importantly, you may not all be representing water utilities, but I think this is broadly true of the water sector, that many Americans want to see the water sector, water managers, those of you related to water management, being leaders in preparing for the local impacts and challenges of a changing climate. Further, not only do people want to see more work being done, they actually trust you as a source of information. And when we talk about a rather sort of polarized topic of climate and climate variability and change, and how it is we reduce our risk to those impacts, it's critical that we have trusted voices and trusted messengers. And based on these statistics on this research by the Water Research Foundation, it's clear that there's a really important opportunity as being trusted brokers of information on the local impacts of climate change knowledge, putting people in the water sector in a unique position to make a difference and to showcase their work and to know that they're sort of stepping into a place where people are going to accept and be interested in the work that you're doing. Not only do they want to see it being done, but you are trusted voices in this challenge that we face as a global society. When we think about climate change, how we respond and how we feel the impacts of a changing climate are really in direct response to how well we sort of balance this equation. This is balancing both how well we prevent future warming from occurring. This is things like mitigation. This is reducing our use of fossil fuels. And critically, how well we prepare for the changes that we've already set in motion. This is often referred to as adaptation. This is the lens through which I do a lot of my work. I work in climate adaptation. And how well we sort of get these two pieces right determine kind of how climate ready our communities are, our infrastructure is, and our economies. It's costly to not do either of these things, and there's lots of research showing that there is a return on an investment for climate ready infrastructure done today to be ready for tomorrow. So as I said, I represent the Minnesota Climate Adaptation Partnership. We're an organization in Minnesota that's working to bring adaptation into discussion and into action on the ground. And this organization has been around for 10 years, and our primary activity has been an annual convening, but we are working to expand our role in this work. We are the only multi-sector statewide group working on climate adaptation, representing everything from state agencies and local governments and the university through to private sector and nonprofit partnerships. So we have lots of voices and perspectives coming to bring to bear on what it is we need to do to support adaptation around the state. Our core activities as we envision sort of this next generation of our organization is providing trusted, regionally relevant climate change information, supporting adaptation planning and the implementation of adaptation actions, supporting and building peer-to-peer networks and sharing best practices, convening leaders across the state and the region, and championing climate literacy. So these are sort of 5 pillars of our work. And sort of why MCAP for the water sector. So building on those 5 pillars, I wanted to showcase some research that I've done in collaboration with the Water Utility Climate Alliance, which is a national alliance of water utilities around the country. You'll notice there's a gap here in the Midwest that I would hope we can maybe work to fill. But they come together and think about best practices and how to lead in terms of integrating climate science into work that's being done across the water sector. And we conducted a study that looked at how water utility engineers in particular were getting information about climate change and how they were accessing it and sort of what they needed in this regard. And so in the spirit of the adaptation partnership, we're hoping to sort of address some of these key needs that emerge within the water sector that certainly aren't unique to the water sector, but I think this hopefully will resonate with you a bit. There's a majority of people that we surveyed around the country that could share examples of climate change information, but just about as many could actually have readily accessible information or didn't know where to look to get climate change information relevant to their job. So there's obviously a need for increasing access to climate change related information that is relevant to the water sector, that's also seen as credible and trusted, so that it gets utilized. We also learned that there's a need for access to climate scientists and university researchers, and you are all smart technical people, and so there needs to be an easy way for you to get access to information, sort of as we heard it, under the hood of our climate models, so that you really understand the information that's being integrated. And so this involves really close partnership between sort of the research scientists and technical experts like yourself. And there need to be more educational opportunities about climate change and its relevance to the work and how it is you plan and prepare, and what is the return on investment, how can you do this work, and how can you build buy-in. And part of what we heard here concretely was that there needed to be case studies made available about how the water sector is acting to prepare for a changing climate. And so we worked to put together a range of engineering case studies showcasing how different utilities, both large and small, across the US and some international examples, how concretely they were using climate science, how they built community and institutional buy-in, what the cost was to do their work. And so really tried to focus on key questions that were perceived as barriers for doing climate adaptation work. And then finally, this is something I hope we can do in the Midwest region. And if anyone's interested, I've got my email at the end of this presentation. Would love to hear if there's interest in bringing the Water Utility Climate Alliance's technical training that we provide for the water sector to integrate adaptation into their work. So we cover everything from decision-making under deep uncertainty to how does climate modeling and regional downscaling work, to how can you communicate about these topics both internally and externally. And so in line with what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says is needed to support adaptation, the Minnesota Climate Adaptation Partnership, and you'll see from Rob here, we have regional efforts really underway to address some of these key needs that enable climate resilience across the region, including improving coordination and collaboration, supporting climate change decision-making in a range of places, and supporting public deliberation and deepened engagement around these topics. And so with that, I'm going to pass the baton here to Rob, who can pick up and tell you about work going on in Wisconsin. But please do reach out, and we'll have an opportunity for some questions after you see the presentations. And I look forward to the discussion today, as well as hopefully in the future. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Montgomery. I'm a water resource engineer with Emmons Oliver, and I'm also adjunct faculty at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Civil Engineering. I'm talking to you from Cottage Grove, Wisconsin, and it's a pleasure to be here, even if I'm only virtual. I'll share a screen and we'll get started. So the Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts, acronym WICI, started in 2008. It was a collaboration between state government and the University of Wisconsin, mainly starting with the Center for Climatic Research, which is part of the Nelson Institute, and the Wisconsin DNR, although a number of other state agencies and university departments became involved. And then there was outreach to a number of stakeholders and interested parties in a variety of communities, which compose the working groups, which I'll talk more about in a minute. That effort resulted in 2011 a pretty comprehensive impacts and adaptation report. It's available on the WICI website, and as well as a number of working group reports providing the details on adaptation to climate change impacts for various topics. In 2011, 2019, the Walker administration reduced activity on the state agency levels, but the university carried on with a lot of good work, continuing work. And in 2019, under the Evers administration, the WICI process was restarted, re-upped, and additional working groups were added, including the infrastructure working group, which is what I've been working on. And in addition, there is a governor's task force initiated by Governor Evers on climate change, which is focused on recommendations for mitigation, that is the reduction of carbon emissions, and not simply the adaptation to climate change impacts. So this re-energized, re-upped wiki process is going to result in a set of reports, much more web-based and media-based in terms of its output, including the working group reports. Probably about this time next year, most of that material will be out. A big advantage of working in this wiki process has been the work that the Center for Climatic Research has been doing in the statistical and dynamic downscaling of global climate models to provide projections on temperature and climate and other climatic variables. Here's an example, and this is all off the website, the wiki website. Here's an example with respect to the increase in days with rainfall exceeding 5 inches, in other words, very wet days. Looking at historical conditions on the left and 2040 to 2060 conditions on the right under the concentration pathway scenario 4.5, which is middle of the road, and I don't think we're going to be that middle of the road. I think we might be in a more extreme situation than that. Nevertheless, this graphic illustrates that we are going to have quite a few more days, maybe 5 days per year more, where in some areas of the state, where we have more days of rainfall exceeding 5 inches. Similarly, there's been a lot of work in precipitation. This graphic I find interesting because one of the notable effects in the 2040 to 2060 timeframe is that wintertime low temperatures, night temperatures in winter will become much warmer than they have been in the past. And this graphic illustrates that at least in northern Wisconsin, there's likely to be 10 to 15 days less that temperatures are below zero. So a significant reduction in days, essentially very cold winter nights. So a little bit about the wiki working groups. I think that's one of the unique characteristics of the wiki process. And that is that there have been groups assembled, and these involve state agencies and a lot of other parties that are affected in management or use of resources, looking at water resources and coastal issues, agriculture and forestry, human health, geographical area issues such as in Milwaukee, and the infrastructure working group that I am working in. It's a real strength of the wiki process that there are several hundred people that are working in one or another of these working groups. And that helps get the information out, because that's fundamentally what this wiki process is about. The infrastructure working group, we made a real effort to draw in municipalities and counties, a lot of directors of public works, various state agencies, special purpose districts like sewerage districts. You see kind of some of the icons there, the logos of various organizations. We've also made an effort to developing a good working relationship with the professional societies that will help get this information out and help present some of our results. So we've done a number of things, and here's a quick summary of some of the things that we've been up to. We conducted a survey, and we're just wrapping up the analysis of that survey. This will also be on the website. There already is some information on the website. So has your municipality conducted a climate change vulnerability assessment? And if you look down there on the various entities, state agencies and cities as Department of Public Works or as whole cities, maybe 15%. Well, that's certainly not 0%. So, but we could say we're just getting into this. Tribes have done better by percentage, and some special purpose districts have done more than that, but nobody's over 50%. So we are just getting into this issue of climate vulnerability assessment. We had more than 300 respondents to this survey, so it was very useful information. Here's another quick bit of information. This is what are the priorities? What data do you really need? We asked this of various folks. Here are people that are infrastructure managers, people who are responsible for running a sewage treatment plant or a highway department. And what they need is data. They want to know what are the projections on temperature and frost and precipitation. They're also interested in examples of infrastructure design guidance. Those are the two bars there, and I'll get the essential data is red bars, and the high priority data is the purple bars. Okay, well, that's a fairly high fraction of people saying we need data, we need technical information, we need design guidance, we need the phrase state compact is we need some guidance and some directives from the state about what we ought to consider. And some of the other high priority items, it's labeled culvert design, but it's really hydraulic adequacy of crossings. That was a very high priority because of all the flooding that we've seen. Interesting, we're looking at the same issues, the same question to elected officials. I just like to point out there the third line, nature-based solutions. Elected officials have heard the message of green infrastructure, and it's very interesting that that was placed at a relatively high priority by the elected officials. Now I'm going to go through a couple more things that our working group has been doing. We've got something called the Wisconsin Rainfall Project that's been funded, and we are using radar data and more recent time periods and more detailed continuous geographic analysis to essentially prepare latest to current conditions, projections of rainfall, intensity, duration, and frequency for a variety of return periods and a variety of storm durations. And here is a graphic that provides some illustration of the latest work with NOAA Atlas 14, which is essentially the current standard for defining precipitation statistics. And the left hand is NOAA Atlas 14. The right hand column is the rainy day software Dan Wright at the Civil Engineering Department's developed. And the right hand graphic, the red, is the difference. Very interesting. We are under predicting rainfall depths fairly significantly in a lot of areas, but in particular, look at the difference in the 3-hour storm. In other words, a storm that's very relevant to urban drainage design. Those storm depths are not that large, and we might be several inches too low in our estimate of short duration storms. So this is very useful information that public works folks want to get at like right now. We're also looking at future condition rainfall statistics using data from the Nelson Institute. We'll come up with similar kind of statistical data for future conditions. We are also looking at climate impact mitigation through reduced carbon content of construction materials, and this is an awareness thing. I was flabbergasted when I first realized that Portland cement production, the main ingredient in concrete, is 7% of global CO2 emissions. And we're looking at defining how can we identify that carbon content and make it visible to the designers and the folks that authorize public works projects to try to reduce carbon content of some construction materials. And we're also dividing our efforts to provide structure to municipalities and how do they conduct a resilience plan that includes climate change. Envision has been out there, and there's also the EPA Climate Resilience Toolkit and other systems to, in a systematic way, take a look at your infrastructure and then start thinking about climate change vulnerability. So we're mainly about outreach and So we are looking forward to, frankly, more collaboration between Wisconsin and Minnesota on these topics. I think we can learn from each other. There's the link to the working group website, and I appreciate your attention. Thank you.